What's going on, guys and gals? Kendall here with Renos for Pros and Joes. I recently did a video showing the ins and outs of the basics of how to use an airless sprayer. And this video is a follow-up to that video because after I was doing some thinking about it, there's some additional things that I wanted to share with you on the front end if you're considering doing a paint project where you're going to be using an airless sprayer, and specifically if you're going to be renting an airless sprayer. Because one of the things that I've talked about in the past in other videos is whether or not to buy or rent. If you're going to be doing airless sprayer work, you've got a 1 or 2 project deal that you need to get squared away, it may be easier and make more sense to just rent the sprayer. However, there are some basic things that you want to keep in mind and be aware of when you go to rent your sprayer. And one of the things that triggered me to think about this is that I recently was working on a project where my sprayer went down and I had to go and rent one. And when I went to go inspect the sprayer that was there at the rental facility, I realized that there were some maintenance issues that really needed to be addressed that were not part of the protocol for the mechanics there at the rental facility's workshop. And so after seeing that, that made me want to come back and make this video for you guys, just to give you some very, very basic pointers about renting paint sprayers from tool rental places. And specifically what we're going to talk about today is filters. And so I've got behind me, I've got an airless sprayer that is a good representation of the type of sprayer that you'd be running at one of these rental places. Be something that looks very similar to this, maybe a step up or a step down. However, the parts that we're going to be discussing today, which is going to be the filters, are going to essentially be very similar, if not the same. So first and foremost, the filter on a airless sprayer is going to be what helps to remove and prevent the trash in the paint or debris in the paint from getting up into the pump and potentially coming out of the gun and onto the surface that you're painting. If you're painting with an airless sprayer, then 9 times out of 10, what you're going for is as smooth a finish as possible. And that's going to be the case whether or not you're going to be painting interior or exterior, if you're going to be painting siding, or if you're going to be painting interior trim. You want to have the best finish that you can possibly get. And one of the things that you want to make sure is that you're not allowing debris and trash to get into your paint. So first of all, what is debris and trash, and how is there debris and trash in paint? You're probably thinking, hey, I just bought my paint, it's new, I got it from the store, I got it from the paint supplier, and there doesn't have trash in it. But not so fast. When the paint is mixed and shipped to the facility, it's going to sit on the shelf or sit in the back of the truck on the way to the facility where it's going to be sold. And ultimately when you get it, they add the dye into the paint and then they put it in the machine and shake it up. However, there's going to be particles in that container that don't get completely mixed in, as well as there's going to be some other particles in that paint can or container that have begun to gel or solidify and dry inside of the can. If you open up any basic can, you're going to be able to look inside of it and probably see some indicators of this happening. And so I'm going to open up a can now and specifically show you what we're talking about, just so that you can have a clear reference of what we're talking about. Okay, so this is just a run-of-the-mill can of paint here. I'm going to pop the top on it. Obviously, this is not brand new, but this is going to do a very good job of demonstrating exactly what I am talking about. So first of all, you can see that there is some paint here on the top. This part is partially dry, so you don't have to worry about that. But when we look inside of the paint can, you can see that there is buildup around the top edge of it, and there's also paint on the sides here that is not down in the bottom of the can. And this is actually a really good example because this paint is actually no good. But as you can see, as the paint begins to congeal, it begins to get hard and stiff. And so when that begins to happen, you end up with trash in the paint that may be floating on the top or even down in the bottom as a result of being some particles in there that didn't get mixed properly or something like that. However, if you're going to be painting with a roller or a brush, one of the advantages of using those type of methods is that you're going to visually put your eyes on the paint as you're pouring it into your paint tray or as you're dipping your paintbrush in the bucket. And frequently when you run into these type of trash issues, you can simply scoop it out and set it aside and make sure that it does not get onto your wall. The difference is when you're going to be using an airless sprayer, that paint is going to be in some type of bucket or reservoir, and the paint is going to be siphoned up out of the bucket and into the pump on the sprayer, which means that you visually will not be putting an eye on the paint as it's being applied to whatever surface you're going to be painting. And this is one of the things that you want to be aware of, and this is why the filters are so important to help remove impurities from the paint. So the next thing I want to show you is one way that you can help prevent some of those impurities from getting into the bucket to begin with. And this is actually going to require you to have two separate paint buckets. You're going to have the bucket that your paint is currently in, and you're also going to have the bucket that you're going to be pouring the paint into. So we're going to start off, we'll assume that this paint that is no good is going to be fresh paint, and we're going to have another bucket over here in my left hand. It's an imaginary bucket. And what you're essentially going to want to do is use a paint filter cup to remove impurities from this paint. So essentially what you're just going to do is pour the paint here out of this bucket into the second bucket, but you're going to use a strainer like this to do so. Now this is one that's just made out of paper, but it has some mesh areas here on the bottom. Essentially what you're going to do is take this cup like this. You're going to hold this cup or put it in the bucket over your container where you're going to be pouring the paint. Once it's strained, you're going to take the paint that came from the store and you're going to pour it into the cup, and it's slowly going to sift through the bottom of this filter, and what you're going to be left with inside of the cup is the impurities and things like that that you did not want to get into your paint to begin with. Okay, so that is one technique that you can use to help remove some of the impurities from the paint. However, there also are the filters on the paint sprayer that are also going to be functioning in this very similar fashion. So to get back to the point that I was making with regards to renting paint sprayers from rental facilities, is they're going to be renting that sprayer out to whoever comes in and has the money to put down the deposit. And so everyone that rents that sprayer doesn't necessarily have the same level of experience or respect for the tool. And so it comes back into the shop multiple times a week. It comes back in various conditions, and they have to do various things to it to make sure that it keeps running. However, the filters on that sprayer may not be a high priority to them. And for that reason, I would suggest that anyone who's going to be renting a paint sprayer, always check out the condition of the filters before you put down your credit card. And I say credit card because almost all rental facilities are going to require a credit card to reserve or to put as a deposit on a piece of equipment. Cash typically doesn't work, just as an FYI. So let me show you, number one, what the paint sprayer looks like, and I'm going to show you where the filters are and show you specifically what you want to look for when you're going to examine those things. By the way, when you're doing this and you're in the rental facility, you can always ask the person that's on duty to show you what the filters look like instead of having to do them yourselves. I'm not trying to turn you all into paint sprayer maintenance people. We just want to show you exactly what you need to be looking for so that you can avoid some headaches down the line. So let's jump into that. Okay, so this is what I would consider to be a run-of-the-mill paint sprayer. And this type of paint sprayer is going to have two filters on it. One is going to be on the actual machine, and the other one is going to be on the gun inside of the handle. So the first thing I want to show you is going to be the filter that's inside of the gun. So here's my gun here, and most of these are going to work very similarly. You're going to take the gun and you're going to twist it apart like this. This is relatively straightforward, and if the machine has been maintained, it shouldn't be too gummed up, but you never can tell. So you're going to pull it away there, and you pull that out, and there is your filter. Okay, so you can see this filter has some debris buildup on it, and it actually still has paint juice and water in it. If you see something like this in your paint sprayer, you want to take a very close look at it, and you may also want to consider removing and replacing it. Now, this is an orange filter for this type of sprayer. This is a fine filter, which is typically going to be used for spraying more finished products like polyurethane and things like that. The more common filter that you're going to find in the gun is going to be a blue filter, which is going to be a more general purpose filter. However, ideally you want this filter to be clean, and you don't want to see this type of buildup, because this is some of the gunk. I'll see if I can scrape some of this off here. This is some of the gunk here that the filter has prevented from getting into the end of the gun and out through the tip, because this is all trash and stuff like that that you don't want to get on the surface that you're painting. You see how that's kind of gummy and stuff like that? This is stuff that you don't want to get in there. I also wanted to make sure to also explain to you that just because you also have some debris in here does not mean that the filter has not been cleaned, or does not mean that the gun has not been cleaned. There's always going to be debris that's going to get trapped in here over repeated use. And so as a rule of thumb, you're going to always just want to check this out just to see how this looks. If it looks bad, you can ask them to replace the filter. If that's not something that they're willing to do, you can always buy your own filter and just take your filter out when you're done. Just to have a clear peace of mind that you've got the best setup possible to make sure that you don't transfer debris onto your paint project. So I'm going to screw this one back on. So of the two filters that are on the machine, the gun filter is the one that is going to be easiest to access. So I'm screwing everything back on here, and that goes back together like that. I'm not sure what brand this gun is, but however, they're all basically about the same. Sometimes the filter that you're going to use on them is going to be slightly different, so you want to pay attention to what type of filter you're going to need for the gun that's going to come with the tool that you're going to be renting. So the next filter is on the machine, and this one's going to be a little bit more involved to get to. On this one, you can see this piece sticking out here. This is housing the filter here in the bottom. And let me see if I can twist it. Sometimes you can twist it to get it off of there. Other times you're gonna have to use a wrench to get to it. Probably gonna have to use a wrench this time. So I'm gonna do that. Or better yet, I'll just flip it. Gonna flip our machine like that. Got it going. I'm gonna flip this back up because there's probably gonna be some liquid that comes out of here, and I'm gonna slide this thing to the front so I don't make a mess all over this table here. I'm gonna slide that and take that out of there. See that drain out like that? So we go in there. Here is another filter. So this is gonna be the big filter, and it slides down in there, and as you can see, there's still paint and stuff in there. I'm gonna pour that out right there. But this just goes to show you, this sprayer actually has been cleaned recently, and you still have a certain amount of paint inside of it. And so when I sit this down, I just wanna take this apart and show you that even though this one doesn't have very much debris inside of it, the filter still has a certain amount of residue on it. So unlike the other filter, we don't see the same amount of debris on the outside here. We don't see that, but we still do see paint here, or the remains of paint. As you can see, it's got quite a bit of water in it. But ultimately, this is something that you want to be aware of, because when you take this apart, specifically if you have them take it apart at the rental place, you can have a very good idea of what's involved with it, and they may even clean it up for you to get it ready for you to take to your job site. So I'm gonna take that, put it back in there like so. Place it back on there like that. Look at those hands, guys. It's got paint and stuff, everything all over the place. So I've showed you the filter on the gun. I've showed you the filter on the actual unit itself, so that you're better equipped to be able to go in and know what you're up against when you get ready to rent a paint sprayer. So number one, check the filter on the gun. Number two, check the filter on the actual machine itself. And if you're going to be buying your own sprayer tips, it's going to be helpful for you to know what type of guard they have on there. The guard is what fits on the end of the gun, and that will dictate what line of sprayer tips you can use, because there's different ones. There's ones for fine finish, as well as ones that are more for general purpose use. That is actually a topic for a different video, but I just wanted to make you aware specifically today of the filters and to make sure that you're going to be going through the process of making sure to check out these 2 filters, as well as investing in a few of these paint strainers. People also sometimes use cheesecloth over the end of the pickup tube, and that's one more thing that I want to show you before we get out of here, is how this paint is siphoned up into the can. Okay, so part of the reason why it's so easy to get trash into the paint and why the filters are more important, besides the fact that you can't see everything that's going on with the paint when it's being siphoned up, is that this is what your siphon hose looks like, okay? So it's got a screen and it's got mesh on it, but the mesh has relatively large holes in it for the paint to be able to pass through, which will allow a lot of trash and debris to pass through. If you know anything about debris and trash and impurities, frequently they're going to be found on the bottom of the paint can. And where does this go? It goes on the bottom of the paint can. So this is going to be sitting right in the bottom of any potential muck and grime and impurities or buildup in the bottom of the can, and it's going to sit there and it's going to suck up the paint from this position down to the very bottom. So it's going to suck from here, the paint is going to drop down in the bucket, and then you're going to be left with whatever's in the very, very bottom. And then you may be able to potentially see that. You may see some muck or a ring around the top of the can and things like that. But we're concerned with the smaller impurities as well, because those are the ones that can get inside of this tube here. And I want to quickly show you what that looks like. So if you look here at this filter, you can see that the holes are relatively big. We can see through them, so you know that there's a lot of trash that can get through there. So we want to make sure that you do everything that you can to prevent that from happening, because if you're taking the time to rent a paint sprayer, then you probably care about how your project comes out. So we want to take these small steps to make sure that we are covering some of our bases to ensure that our end result is what we want it to be. So hopefully you guys found this video informative. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one.